gonna press. Greetings all, my name is F.A. Osarin. I am a doula and a student midwife. Today on Reproductive Futurism, I'm going to be giving the floor to Candace. She uses both pronouns, and they're going to be presenting on The Future is Black and Trans today. So I'll give you the floor, Candace, and I'll mute myself and not be in the background.
All right, thank you, F.A. So I'm Candace. I'm going to start sharing my screen. So like it was already mentioned, I'm Candace Martin. My pronouns are they and she. I prefer they, but she's also affirming for me. I'm a doula and artist, and I'm also a co-parent with my partner. I have a bachelor's in health psychology, and my business is Birthbound Doula Services. Before I begin, I want to take a moment to, one, acknowledge that I am on Duwamish territory, which is also known as Seattle. And I also would like to take a moment to thank Spirit and my ancestors for leading me to this place today. So I'm just going to do a quick overview of the agenda today. Sorry. So we just did some acknowledgements. I also want to take a moment to center, mostly for myself because I'm pretty nervous, but also to open the space up for people to be receptive to the information that I'm here to share today. I also would like to do some participation and go over some examples of white supremacy, just so we can all be starting on the same page. And then just go over some statistics that I think are very important for everyone to know, but especially birth workers and other medical providers. And then I want to review some ideas of stress and how that affects bodies, and then just review some social support, what that looks like, why it's important, and then go over some tips for caring for self, and then just do a quick little wrap up. So to begin, I really think it's important to just take a moment to ground ourselves, just to be here in this present moment, have our feet planted firmly on the ground if you're sitting or if you need to stand. Lay on the ground if that's more comfortable for you, but I just want to take a moment to just take 3 deep belly breaths together. Thank you. I hope everybody is doing well, feeling more grounded, and ready to just go over some information. I'm sure some of it's not new, but like I said, I think it's important to review and just remind everybody about the disparities that Black communities are experiencing, especially trans and Black communities. So if the people that are in here now could maybe type in some answers to this, like what are your ideas of white supremacy, or what are examples that y'all have? If not, it's okay. There's only a couple people on here right now, and I can just go through the list that I have. One person. Yes, licenses and certifications. Do you want to talk more on that or no? Because
yeah, I list licenses and certification as it's something that is in my life right now. It feels that we have to prove your ability or your capabilities in a form of like paperwork that is really daunting and a lot of fees to a higher level of people or people who decided to create an organization and then made themselves the leaders that everyone needs to report to. And it's not really a open decision or choice, like who gets to look over your paperwork, who gets to decide, and so forth. And it's also a way of like gatekeeping people out of whatever profession that they want to get into, in this role of professionalism as well that plays with that.
Absolutely. Like, and it's putting limitations, like you said, barriers. And creating these barriers, it's limiting who can participate in whatever like career or trade or whatever. And it's statistically more difficult for Black people, if we're talking about birth work, to get into midwifery, as you know. And then even more so for trans people to get involved. And then another person put static expectations of what families look like. Absolutely. There's the idea of like there should be the cis masculine person, the cis femme person, the 2 kids. And that's just not what families are looking like anymore. And there definitely needs to be a shift in the framework that's used when we're speaking about families. So yeah, those are 2 really great examples of white supremacy. I also, I wrote a few examples down myself that I would like to share. This abortion law that's happening in Texas right now is absolutely an example of white supremacy, because we know that the populations that have money that are white are going to be able to get access to what they need when they need it still. And it's going to be Black and brown communities that have less resources, less access to resources and information that are going to be even more so affected by this law, because we were already affected. We're already affected by abortion laws. We're already affected by like medical experiences in general. Like whenever Black and brown people enter these spaces, like we're in danger. And we know this to be true, especially for people who are giving birth. And so also an example would be anti-Blackness, colorism, racism, transphobia, queerphobia, homophobia, fat phobia, like all these fears that run our community, that run our country because of whiteness and the idea that whiteness is superior, essentially. Somebody wrote, or FA wrote, Governor Abbott testing positive for COVID and getting immediate antivirals while banning masks in the state. Absolutely. Like the ability to spread misinformation and put people's lives at risk and overwhelm systems that are in place, and then be able to just get whatever you need when you need it after you're telling people that it's not a problem. And it's because that person is a cis white man and participates in white supremacy. So also, like I mentioned, the medical industrial complex is also an example of white supremacy. And I want to spend some time going over what white supremacy looks like in birth work. So the US has the highest mortality rate compared to 10 other highly resourced countries. This means that compared to Norway, the Netherlands, and New Zealand, the US is experiencing 17.2 deaths per 100,000 births, live births, compared to 3 or fewer in these other countries that I've listed, New Zealand, Norway, and the Netherlands. That is huge. That's huge when you consider how much this country has. Like, this should not be happening. We should not be having the highest, not one of the highest. We have the #1 spot when it comes to mortality rates in gestational parents. Also, the United States has been experiencing an increase in the deaths of gestational parents since 2000. So even though all of this information is out in the open, we're not seeing much of a shift or a change in the statistics. Like the mortality rates are not decreasing, even though these conversations are being had. And that's why I think it's important to always mention this. So people is always in the forefront of people's minds, so that we're always thinking about what we can do to shift this. Also, the US is undersupplied when it comes to care providers during birth and delivery and labor. So we are undersupplied when it comes to midwives, when it comes to OBGYNs. We do not have the same amount of support in this country that other countries that are as resourced as we have, which makes it more difficult to get adequate care, especially when we consider how a lot of these care providers are not BIPOC people, are not trans people, are not queer people, or at least it's not as easy to get access to these people. And then also the US, there's no guaranteed parental leave, which we all know, as no paid parental leave during the postpartum period, which affects people who are trying to support their families, like who need to stay home. We know that postpartum is forever. So like expecting at least 40 days after you've given birth in any capacity is not unrealistic. It's absolutely necessary. And it's absolutely necessary to be having access to money while you're experiencing this shift in your life. This is not new news. We know that Black gestational parents are dying 2 times more compared to white gestational parents, and 3.5 times more compared to Latinx people. This is an atrocity. We all know that it is, and we need to keep doing the work to shift this. And it's not our individual work. Like I'm not saying that we as individuals need to do something. Clearly we're doing something. We're here right now. Like we're doing this work in community now, but we need to continue talking about it so that the people who have the power to shift these disparities do, so that we can put pressure. And so we can have the information to go into our community and do better than what is being offered in hospitals. Like what is the subpar treatment? We need to be in our communities, providing the support that we know, excuse me, that our people need. And the Black infant mortality rate is 2.3 times higher than the rates of white babies. There's a lot of disparities when it comes to the infant mortality rate. Like Black babies are more likely to be low birth weight, where Black babies are more likely to experience sudden infant death syndrome. And all of this has to do with the medical industrial complex. Doctors don't believe Black people when we say we don't feel well. Like there's just an overall disinterest in providing help when Black people walk through the doors of these medical systems. So much so that during the postpartum period, like Black low income, there's a study done in New York where lower income Black gestational parents were less likely to receive postpartum screening, not because they were less likely to experience postpartum depression, but because it was less likely for the care providers to reach out. There's also the fear of being in medical settings And when you've experienced a traumatic birth with a provider, you're not going to want to go back after that. You're not going to want to go back. Not to mention like being able to get to appointments, like all of this takes effect in the care that Black community is receiving. So we know what is happening in Black communities in birth settings. We know the disparities. I don't think a lot has been discussed when it comes to trans identities in medical settings, at least not so much in the birth world. And I want to point out that all of this research, like all these statistics, do not parse out trans identities or non-binary identities. Like the data is saying maternal. So the assumption is that the people who are giving birth are identifying as women. And there's been no work to separate this data. Like, is everybody participating in these surveys women? Are they women? Are there people who are trans that are participating in this? So we really need to fine tune our research and like figure out how trans and non-binary people are being affected by these rates, especially in Black communities. Like I'm curious to know if the rates are higher when you're a Black trans man giving birth. Like I really would like that data. So if anybody out there is doing it, please share it with me. Or if you have any information, please share it with me. So let's talk about what it's like to be trans and receive healthcare. So this is a bar graph it was research conducted by the Lambda Legal Association. And they collected surveys from 4,916 respondents. And as you can see, excuse me, as you can see, people who identify as transgendered in these surveys are experiencing a lot of medical violence, neglect, fear of being refused medical services, violence of medical personnel treating trans people differently. Like these are astonishing rates. And like the reason I'm talking about this is because we need to understand the impact of having the intersections of the identity of being Black and trans, and then also pregnant, like what that looks like. And there's not a lot of research being done. So I want to draw these connections. So if you're Black and you're experiencing all of this trauma in the medical system, and then on top of that, you're trans and you have this history of trauma, like that is additional stress that is going to take a part in your health. Like you're going to get sick. You're probably going to have issues with like your pregnancy. Like we know what stress does for a pregnant body. And then because of this lack of access to healthcare that trans people are experiencing, there's higher rates of suicide in this community, and even higher rates when it comes to Black and brown trans people. So there's so much stress, and the stress is making us sick, like I said. And then to make it even more of a dire situation, 28% of transgendered people don't have access to insurance. So it's, even if you want to get help, even though the help is probably not going to be competent, it's not going to be affirming, there's 28% of trans people who can't even attempt to take care of themselves with this system. So like I said, being Black and trans, having these identities, and then being pregnant, there's a lot of stress. And that's really what I want to focus on, is the effects of stress on the body. So when we think about Black trans people going into the doctor's office, being in a violent situation, people aren't respecting their pronouns, just the like the known experience of violence that Black people experience when going into medical settings. All of this is stress. So the primary stress effects are essentially when our stress hormones release in our body. And at this point, our bodies can do the work of balancing it out if the stressor is removed. But if the stressor is not removed, if you can't find medical providers who are not violent, who are not actively harming you, who are not putting you in situations where you don't feel safe, the stress isn't going away. And that leads to secondary outcomes where detrimental changes occur to our metabolic systems, our cardiovascular systems, and like this results into issues with insulin, heart issues, so like blood pressure issues. So if we don't get a handle on the stress in our bodies, sickness comes. Like we know this, we know that stress is not good. That's why we meditate. That's why we go for walks. So it's important. It is so important for medical providers and doulas, midwives, doctors, nurses, therapists, social workers, like everybody in this system of care. It's important for us all to recognize the effect that the interactions that we have with Black and trans people have. Because if we're not getting rid of the primary effects of stress, we are initially encouraging disease in people's bodies. And then if it's not handled in the secondary outcomes, it can lead to disease and death. So I just want to stress the importance, like the reason I went over all of the statistics, the reason that I'm like talking about this at all is because I firmly believe that stress has a huge impact on bodies. And I believe that we have a place where we can alleviate some of the stress that people are experiencing. Doulas do it in birth, postpartum doulas do it for families. But the focus, I think, right now needs to shift to Black and trans communities. There's a lack of support. There's a lack of trained people. And it makes sense because if you're a Black student, if you're a Black trans student, a Black queer student, and you are in these trainings, these schools where you're trying to be a midwife, where you're trying to be a doula or get a master's in public health, like whatever you're trying to do to serve your community, you are also experiencing all of these stressors. You're also experiencing them, and they affect the way you learn. They affect the way that you can take in information. They affect the way you move through the class space. So I believe that we need to focus on how we can be eliminating the effects of stress in Black and trans communities. And one way that I think, well, research has also shown that this happens with social support. So doulas are great. We're amazing because our main goal is to do this, is to provide the support, the social support. And there's 4 different types of support. There's emotional support, which is providing empathy, love, trust, and caring. There's instrumental support, which is providing tangible aid and services that directly assist a person. Then there's informational support by providing information that a person can use to address problems. And then appraisal support, which is like feedback and affirmations. Doulas do all of this. Doulas are in labor, providing emotional support and appraisal support, telling people that they can do it, like holding people when they need to be held, Doulas are also providing information. Like when clients have questions, we are responsible for like answering them in the best capacity that we can, which is also in our scope of practice. So this is paramount when it comes to providing support for trans and Black clients. Also, like students, like I said, this is not just affecting our clients, this is affecting people who are trying to enter the birth world. I know I have my own personal story, and FA has her personal story, and there's so many of us that have been trying for a really long time to enter these spaces, and harm is being done and stress is being put on us. And their shift needs to happen where we are providing support in all of the capacities that we can, where we're offering it and we're taking it and we're asking for it, because this really is the key to us healing. We need support, we need community to do all of this. So then I would also, sorry. So then we can also take some of this healing into our own hands. And I just wanted to review some ways that are, I'm sure, not new, but that I think are great ways for enacting radical self-care. And I'm not talking about self-care like going to get your hair done or your nails done or doing like retail therapy, although those are still important ways for people to participate in self-care. I'm talking about the self-care that the Black Panthers were discussing, like radical self-care that Audre Lorde talks about. Like we need to be tending to ourselves. We need to be meditating. We need to be like taking care of our minds. Like acupuncture, I believe, is a great way to participate in that. And it's very low, it's not very invasive at all. There's community clinics where you can get affordable acupuncture. And like, I really believe that that is something that can be used, and the Black Panthers used it. So I think that this needs to be incorporated back into Black and trans communities. Also, like, I 100% support resting. We cannot burn ourselves out doing this work. We can't. And like, that is, I feel like the culture of birth work is that you're supposed to run yourself ragged. And I am a firm believer that we're not going to be able to shift things. We're not going to be able to change things. We're not going to be able to provide the support that's needed if we are not resting.
Candace, sorry to interrupt. What is it called when, I think it was on the other slide, after the first act of no, go back a little. This one, okay, so secondary outcomes. Okay. And so the Radical Self-Care Act is good for preventing secondary outcomes.
Well, also so the primary effects is when the stress hormones are released. So really you want to be doing things so that you can bounce back from the primary effect and you don't even go into the secondary outcomes. That's not to say that if you are experiencing things that have you in secondary outcomes, like if you're having issues controlling your blood sugar or your blood pressure, and it hasn't led to tertiary outcomes where you're actually being diagnosed with diabetes or like cardiovascular disease. Something can still be done in the secondary outcome. Did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, cool. So the hope is that we are catching it at the primary effects so that our nervous systems can go back to regulating, because stress is not inherently bad. We need stress as human animals. Stress is important for us to learn and grow. the issue is when we can't bounce back from producing the stress hormones. That's when we get stuck in like fight and flight. And that's what is impacting our bodies, because we're experiencing so much stress and trauma on a regular basis, and it's not being alleviated. Like anywhere you turn in society, there's no relief. And that's why we need the social support and community. So, so yes, acupuncture, rest, and then movement also. And I'm not saying movement to like participate in the white supremacist idea of fat phobia. Like, I'm not supporting movement as a way to like regulate weight or anything like that, but movement really helps us metabolize stress and trauma. Like, it helps us get rid of it. It helps us move it out of our bodies so that we're not holding on to it, because that is what is making us sick. And as Black trans people, like, we need to be here. We're the ones who are shifting like frameworks. We're the ones who are creating. So we need to be here, and we need to be sure that we're being taken care of and we're taking care of ourselves. So go for a walk. If somebody pisses you off, leave, go for a walk. You don't need to stay there. No matter the situation. Like, I can't think of any reasons to stay if you are feeling unsafe, if you're feeling scared, because like I said, we hold on to that. And if we need to be taking the time to release that from our bodies. So movement, acupuncture, rest are all great ways to do that. And it's really difficult to want to participate or like find the time and space to participate in those things when we live in a society that does not value rest or like wellness and rest. Oftentimes rest is thought of as like you're being lazy, or like there's other things you can be doing, but the reality is this rest is where we can dream. Like, if we allow our bodies to rest, we can have the space and capacity to dream up new ideas, to create new things. So rest. And then also I am a budding herbalist, and I strongly believe in the energetics of plants and herbs. So something that I think is important to incorporate in radical self-care as Black trans people are floral washes or spiritual baths, which are really easy to do. And the idea is that like the energetic properties of the herbs are in the tub and are helping you are promoting the properties inside of yourself, whatever plants that you're picking. And some plants that I think are really great for Black trans people, like pregnant, postpartum people, Black trans birth workers, because we're carrying a huge load right now, are hawthorn, the leaf, and the berries, because they are supportive for grief, loneliness, and isolation. And hawthorn is really great heart medicine. I think that we need all the hawthorn we can get. We have a lot of heart healing that we need to do. And there's so much grief. There's generations of grief, like generational trauma, there's generational grief. And it's just being compounded on with the experiences that we are having ourselves. So definitely hawthorn, I think, needs to be in like the radical self-care repertoire for Black trans people. And then also dandelion roots and leaves, because dandelion is cleansing and nourishing and is really good liver medicine. So it's tonifying. Liver is also where anger comes from. So if you're holding on to a lot of anger and you're having difficulties like releasing that, dandelion is a great herb to work with. I know I definitely incorporate dandelion in my like herbal kit. Like I'm very drawn to dandelion, and like I can admit it's because I hold a lot of anger. I process things through anger, so I have to be sure that I'm not staying in that space, and dandelion definitely helps like uplift and brings like brightness to my experiences that would otherwise be infuriating. And then also ginger, it's warming and promotes movement, and is attributed to the stomach. Ginger is safe in pregnancy. I've read like some places that it's an emmenagogue, so you need to be careful if you're in the early stages of pregnancy, but otherwise, like I said, it's warming and it provides movement. So if you are feeling stagnant in feelings or emotions, or like even if your digestion is stagnant, because oftentimes like that is emotional stagnation is when we're having like GI issues. Ginger is really great to incorporate in promoting the movement of hard feelings, sad feelings, like whatever. So I really appreciated when FA asked this question last year. And I would like to know what y'all think reproductive futurism is.
I feel like it's just cheap for me to answer.
That's fair. I mean, if nobody wants to write anything in the chat, I can just list off some of the ideas that I have written down. So for me, I definitely think that it's Black, trans, and queer centered. Like, unless we can always be incorporating language and care that is centered in Blackness, that is centered in queerness, that is centered in transness, we are always going to be like doing a disservice to our clients. So definitely those. I also think that rest, I really will never get off of resting, especially like after experiencing a midwifery program and the idea that you just need to be essentially making yourself sick to get to where you want to be. Like rest, you can't, there's no way that you can do it well if you aren't giving an opportunity to rest. There's absolutely no way that your body can heal, that your mind can heal, so that you can take in the information that you need. So rest, especially for students who are learning how to move through reproductive justice and health. Also, I think that reproductive futurism is resistance, clearly. And then also, I think that it supports interconnectedness and collaborative work and interdisciplinary work. And I say that because of my experience as a student midwife, and just like experiences that I've heard of other midwives, like the lack of collaboration between certain medical providers is not helpful. Like, we're not helping anybody by refusing to work with a care provider that patients and clients want to work with. And also, I think that in working in collaboration, we can learn so much. We can create so much because there's different ideas coming from different disciplinaries. And we can grow and we can heal when we are working together. And I know that that sounds so cliche, but it's the truth. Like, we need to be working together. We need to be collaborating so that we can be providing the care that Black trans people need, not even deserve, like need. It's a necessity. Everybody needs competent care to heal and be well. So yeah, I don't know if anybody wrote anything. Land back, yes, I love all of these reparations interdependence and communally centered learning, healing spaces, expanding our imaginations of how we can be held in community and kinship, dismantling white supremacy. I love all of these. Oops, sorry. So in talking about like my belief in the importance of like working interdisciplinarily, like and working with other people who aren't necessarily doing the same exact work as you, I wanted to list some people who inspire me, who are not involved in birth work, but really contribute to like who I am, my politics, how I have created my business. And it's Trisha Hersey, who is the creator of the NAP ministry that supports rest as radical healing and like radical acts. So I really support the work that she's doing and encouraging specifically Black people to take the rest that is owed to us after generations of our ancestors doing hard labor and never getting an opportunity to rest. Like we can take that for ourselves. And then I also have Erica Hart and Ebony Donley, who are like my, I love their love, and I love the work that they do together. Erica Hart is a non-binary trans femme who is a sex educator. And I love the work that they do, supporting Black trans people and health, and just really like centering the importance of competent sex education, especially for Black youths, especially for queer Black youths and trans Black youths, because if you've gone to public school, you know the atrocities that are sex education. So I really appreciate the work that they're doing. And then I also have Zora Neale Hurston, because she's that bitch. Like I aspire to be as free as she appeared to be, at least. And I really have taken her philanthropy to heart. I appreciate the way that she has never stagnated. I appreciated how she always like shifted where she needed to shift so that she could do what she needed to do for herself and community. And I appreciate the magic that she held. So there's some people that I am inspired by, and I think that y'all should look into, because we need to be connecting with, we need to be looking at different ways that people are trying to liberate Black people, Black trans people specifically. And I think that these are some great people to learn from in doing that. So that is the end. If you are interested in anything that I said, if you are vibing with me and you would like to collaborate, this is my information. I'm also selling t-shirts right now for Black trans support. I'm raising money for my birth fund so that I can provide support to BIPOC, queer and trans and non-binary families. I think it's important for me to focus my time and energy on supporting my community. So if you're interested, go buy a cool t-shirt. And then these are my references that I used throughout my presentation. So there's time for questions.
Yes, I was just squinting at the references too.
I
As if
can't.
we have any more time to read the books since we haven't read the books we bought before.
I love that like Instagram post. It's like I cope with buying books that will comfort me one day. Well, thank y'all for coming out and listening. I appreciate feedback. So if anybody has any, that would be helpful for me. And thank you for holding the space to listen and be here.
Oh, there's something in the chat box.
Oh, yes, yes. So I did not find, like I said in the beginning, it's really difficult to find research about like complications and issues that come up in pregnancy and postpartum that are trans focused, or like that even the researchers have pulled out that information about trans or non-binary identities. The only thing that I found about postpartum depression was about low income communities, and Black people had the highest rates of postpartum depression compared to whites, and less, like, care providers were not showing up in the ways that they were showing up for their white patients. So like Black clients who were in the postpartum period who were supposed to be being screened were not actually being called by medical providers for follow-up care. That's all that I could find, at least, but I can look harder and see if I find anything specific for Black trans folks. My assumption is, like, because of, like, if you piece all of the research together, like Black people have higher rates of depression, trans people have higher rates of depression, like even in pregnancy. So I would assume that Black trans people have an immense amount of depression in our communities. And that's why I think that we need to be doing this specific research so that we can have this information and like do what we need to do.
And be able to get access to these grants as well. Because they're going to all these white queer orgs.
Exactly.
Because they have the numbers, unfortunately. What is white supremacy?
Exactly. That's like the money, and then half the time it's like you already have the resources. So like, why are you doing this? Yeah. Were there any other?
And yeah, as a midwife, its support would be, you know, similar to other ways we're supporting PPD and baby blues. We have to really prepare people for what happens to your hormones after birth, and let them know about setting up things like meal trains and support and housing care and having your affairs in order. Most people are pretty naive to what sleep deprivation does to you. Mm-hmm. And it's this expectation that, like, oh, me and my partner will be fine with the baby. And I'm always like, no,
you won't. Yeah. I mean, and it's so, like, I know sometimes it's the cost that deters people from getting doulas or like postpartum doulas or any additional support. But like when people have the resources, I'm always confused. Like, don't you want extra help? Like, don't you want somebody coming in here and like doing these specific things for you so you can get rest? Like the thing that you
think like
right
it's like
now.
This trauma response of like, you know, I see it in my mother of this, I can do it all myself.
Yeah.
I don't need anybody here. Whenever I do like outsource assistance or help with the house, it's met with like, oh, you're lazy, or why aren't you doing it this way? And I'm just like, so everybody can rest, and we can invite people with capacity, and we can pay them well to do that. But we do apply a lot of shame to ourselves for asking for help. or
Absolutely.
accepting help.
Absolutely. I mean, and it's been passed down to us. Like, I feel like this current generation is really trying to unwork that. And like, we're trying to practice leaning into community because we recognize that we need help. Like, fuck that. Like, come help me, please. Like, please come make me a meal. Please come, like, keep me company. Like, I don't even need you to do anything. Just sit here with me so that I know that there's somebody here.
And then someone asked, can you put up your contact info one more time? And then I was going to ask if you can explain again why you're selling the shirts.
Okay, yes. So I have a birthbound doula fund. Sorry, I'm trying to figure out what I'm doing. And so I'm essentially raising money so that I can put money into this fund. So when I have a client who needs extra support or doesn't have the money at all, I can just pull from this resource of money. So that's what that's for. And like I said, I'm focusing my efforts on supporting BIPOC, specifically Black, trans and or queer and or non-binary families. Because I can and I want to, and that's where I feel there's the most need.
Thank you so much, Candace. This was really great. If you guys want to connect with Candace, as you can see, birthbounddoula.com, as well as Birthbound Doula on Instagram. This live will be saved and shared amongst all. Thanks again.